And now, an Envision Financial podcast with Luke Smith on Canberra's 2CC.
It's time to welcome to the studio once again from Envision Financial, the one and very only Luke Smith. Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Thanks for dropping by today. And I've just noticed that it's the 24th of October, and what that means is it's 2 months until Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Where did the year go?
I don't know. We blinked, and 2 weeks ago it felt like it was February. So yeah, I'm in a little bit of shock.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's gone very, very quickly. So I know it's not quite the end of the year yet, but for whatever reason, we've decided to take a bit of a look back at 2025 and some of the misconceptions that people have about managing their finances. What have you got for us?
Well, I have people come in all the time and tell me what they can and can't do, and I don't know where they've got that information from. And I think the important thing about understanding the misconception is it could be quite dangerous, could be quite expensive, and it could be quite limiting if your chain of thought isn't in line with existing legislation. So we're going to touch on a few that I've had, and then we'll give it yes or no, and we'll break down a few of the top ones that I get a lot of. So the first one I get all the time is, well, I can't add any money to super now because I've retired. Wrong. You need to come at superannuation and say, am I eligible to contribute? So there's two sides to that. Am I under 67 and want to claim a deduction? Yes, I can. Am I over 67 and want to claim a deduction? Yes, but you need to meet a work test. You've got to do 40 hours in 30 days. Or I can put tax-free money into super up to the age of 75, provided I'm within my superannuation limits, but you are eligible to do so. So this misconception that, well, I'm done now, so super's quarantined from me. No, not at all. You've always got to come back and say, what am I trying to do? How am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? So that's the first one we can squash. Next one I get a lot of is, well, I've reached my transfer balance cap. I can't put any money into super. Wrong. Transfer balance cap is the maximum amount of money you can have in super and take a tax-free pension and have tax-free earnings. Your total super balance is the limit that says whether you can or cannot put that in. Now, for some people, that number may be the same. It's currently $2 million. Your transfer balance cap, depending on when you started a pension, could be a lot less than that. But the transfer balance cap is not the measure that you use to say, can I put it in? So think about total super balance first, and we can squash that one as well. I can't claim a tax deduction if I'm not working. Wrong. Working has nothing to do with your eligibility of tax deduction. It's the type of contribution that you put into superannuation. Here's an example. I've retired, I'm taking a pension out of my superannuation fund, I'm over 60 and everything comes out tax-free, and I decide to sell an investment property. And I have a large capital gain on the sale of said property. I'm able to make a deductible contribution to super up to the $30,000 limit, or look back 5 years and use the catch-up legislation to try and reduce the capital gain on the sale of that asset. Your eligibility to do that has nothing to do with your capacity or current working status. So you need to think first, do I need the deduction, yes or no? And then why would I make a contribution like that? And a property capital gain is a good example of that. Or you might be selling some CBA shares. There may be a range of reasons that you've triggered a capital gain, which is just income by another name, but it has nothing to do with the fact that you're not working and your eligibility to contribute for a deduction. So we can squash that. I can only make a contribution to the PSS. No, that's not correct either. You can make a 5, 2, 7, 10% contribution to the PSS, and you can make a deductible contribution to another super fund. Now, you can salary sacrifice to another super fund. You can make a personal deductible contribution in June to another super fund. You have to put the money into another super fund. And we're not saying that the PSS is bad. What we're saying is the PSS is a defined benefit scheme and does not accept that type of contribution. So even if you wanted to put it in there, they will not accept it. That's why you need another fund. But I find a lot people come and go, well, I put 10% into the PSS, that's all I can do. No, you're leaving lovely tax deductions potentially on the table, and you need to think about using another super fund to limit income tax and maximise your retirement capital. So we can squash that one. I'm going to leave my super to my kids. They don't pay any tax. Potentially. but maybe not. So now we need to come back and say, what is the underlying status of our fund? And we've talked about this at length in other shows. There's a taxable component of your super and a tax-free component of your super. The taxable component of your super that comes from earnings, superannuation guarantee from work, and deductible contributions incurs a 17% liability if it's paid to non-dependent kids. So like I think last week when we spoke about where does insurance proceeds go, are they dependent or not? This is a similar line of thinking. My super's coming out. Is the beneficiary a dependent or not? If the beneficiary is a non-dependent, i.e. adult child, then there could be tax implications and we need to think about a recontribution strategy to try and increase the tax-free percentage and reduce the taxable percentage. But we can't make the assumption that, well, I'm over 60, it's tax-free. Yeah, it is to you over 60, but not potentially to a beneficiary. So keep that in mind and check the status of your fund. An industry fund will let you control franking credits and pays you an income stream. Maybe. That's not technically true either. You have no control over franking credits in an industry fund. And I think it's one of the greatest downfalls of that type of vehicle. And I say regularly, a mini won't pull a horse float. And what I mean here is exactly an example of this. Cars have certain sizes and certain purposes. So do super funds. When people retire, one of the key things they say to me regularly is, I want to control my income, I want to maximise the franking credits, and I want flexibility and cost effectiveness. Now, those three things you don't get from an industry fund because they're unitised. You don't get the franking credits as a member directly, and you get no income because they don't pay a dividend. So you need to think about the core benefits that you want to control in retirement. And if the fund you're in doesn't offer them, that doesn't mean it's a bad fund. It's just not right for you and your situation. So keep that one in mind. A self-managed super fund is expensive. Well, the answer here is it might be.
Well, yes, how long is a piece of string?
Correct. And I generally say where you're talking combined super between a couple over $1 million combined, I think you'll find that a self-managed super fund is one of the most cost-effective vehicles in this country. So you've got very, very low fees. You've generally got fixed fees. And then you have a much wider range of control flexibility that a lot of people like for a range of reasons. So we can't assume that they're expensive because they really aren't. Now, if you have a self-managed super fund with a $250,000 balance, yep, that's going to be expensive. And I would say that's probably not appropriate for you in the majority of situations unless there was a specific objective you were trying to achieve. But as a generality, a combined superannuation balance over $1 million, $1.2 million, you'll find that a self-managed super fund's actually cheaper to run than an industry fund in some situations. So again, don't assume they're expensive because you could be missing out on a huge amount of control. I have to have $10,000 or more to start investing. No. You can open a micro investing account with $50. You can open a Vanguard personal portfolio with, I think, $200. The greatest attribute for younger people, grandchildren, and the children of clients is that they start doing something a little sooner. I would much rather have somebody's birthday money going into a diversified portfolio with the likes of a Vanguard or a BetaShares or any platform that allows you to benefit from compound interest and growth and then add money to it progressively. Even if you added $10 a week, $15 a month, $50, it doesn't matter. Add something over time because time and compounding are very, very powerful. And when you work out the numbers, you wish you'd started sooner. So don't think that you need a big block of capital to start. You also don't need to go and pick this share or that share. Just go and pick a general pre-mixed option with a provider in a similar way that you would with your super. Most people come in me, I'm in balanced, I'm in high growth, I'm in low growth, I'm in whatever the label is. You can do exactly the same in your own name and start something a little bit sooner. I have a will, it takes care of all of my assets. I was told this one today. No, it doesn't. So your will has no legal control over your superannuation. That's why in your superannuation, you have the ability to make what's called a binding or non-binding nomination. And that directs your superannuation somewhere. So your will control all of your non-superannuation assets. A binding nomination will direct superannuation potentially to the beneficiary. It could be a spouse or kids, or it could be the estate. And once it gets into the estate, then your will control what happens. But the money needs to leave the superannuation environment. So again, really, really important. A will doesn't cover everything. Another big assumption with a will is, well, I have an enduring power of attorney inside it. I heard that one this week. That's a bit like saying I'm going to peel open a banana and there's an apple inside, right? They are two very separate things, generally two separate documents made and created at the same time, but have two very different purposes. They are not one in the same.
Well, that is an interesting one, isn't it? Because a will and an enduring power of attorney are very complementary documents.
Yes, correct.
But they apply at very different times, don't they?
100%.
Yes,
100%.
For the will to come into effect, you have to die.
Yeah,
the enduring power of attorney exists before you die.
Exactly right. And if you're dead, the enduring power of attorney is no longer enduring.
Exactly.
Because you're not here. So, again, the misconception is that everything does everything, and we need to be far more specific. And again, this is where great tailored legal advice can remove any sort of assumption or misunderstanding and impact what you thought was going to be the outcome of your broader strategies when it comes to your estate planning. Another one I get all the time is my concessional contribution limit is $30,000 for every job. No, you have one concessional limit and it's $30,000 a year, and you can have one job, you could have 10 jobs. You don't get a $30,000 limit per job. Otherwise, we'd all have 4 jobs.
Indeed, we would. In fact, I'd have a different job every day of the week.
So would I. So they're the sort of key ones that I've had of late. The other one I get a lot as well is, we're going to apply for Centrelink, so all of our assets count. No, not necessarily. If we have a 67-year-old that's going to apply for Centrelink, and let's say he has a 65-year-old partner, if the partner is under age pension age and has not started a pension, the assets in the partner's name are exempt in the eyes of Centrelink. If the partner at 65 has started a pension, then her assets will be included in the collective assessment under the asset test. So you need to be very careful about the structure of your super when 67 sneaks up on you and you're eligible potentially for a Centrelink entitlement, because there are strategies there to maximise your benefits and still maintain all of the control and flexibility of normal super.
Now, you raised a hypothetical there with a fairly small age difference, but I guess that could become more of an issue if that age difference is a little bit bigger.
100%. And this is where you need to think about, well, whose name are the assets in? If that was me and I was 67 and let's say there was a 55-year-old partner, you'd be thinking about getting the assets into the younger person's name because they would be exempt in the eyes of Centrelink, which could then potentially maximise the entitlements for the older person in the relationship. So there's a bit to that, and it pays to be proactive on that front because eligibility for age pension sneaks up. That segues me into the last one, which I get all the time is, well, I've got to work to 67 to get my super. And people muddle up Commonwealth preservation age of 60 for super and 67 for the eligibility for Centrelink. I have a lot of people coming and go, well, I've got to work to 67 anyway. And I go, oh, really? You love your job that much? They go, no, but that's when I get my super. No, that's Centrelink. And the relief on their face, they've just saved 7 years of their life. And they go, oh, you're amazing. I go, it wasn't me.
Yes.
I didn't do anything.
These are just the rules.
It's just the rules. Yeah, but the look of relief on people's faces is phenomenal. So again, assumptions can be really dangerous. And I think we've done a really good job to squash the big ones that I see regularly.
Luke Smith from Envision Financial is with me in the studio this afternoon, and we're dealing with some of the misconceptions that have arisen over the year. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Luke Smith from Envision Financial is with me in the studio today, and we're taking a look at some of the big misconceptions people have experienced throughout the year of 2025. Luke, we've sort of rattled through a lot of different things today, but what are the key things to remember?
Well, I think the first thing is don't assume. Find out, bit of Google, ask around, or come to somebody that knows what they're talking about. You wouldn't walk into a plumber's office and ask for electrical advice. you probably get some good advice, but it may or may not be possible, and you may or may not survive if you cut the wrong wire. And I think this, from a financial standpoint, is very similar. What gets spoken about on the golf course on a Saturday or Friday night at Mahjong with the ladies, whatever it is you're doing, and there's the rumour mill around the water cooler, take it with a grain of salt unless you investigate it, because everybody's situation is different. Everybody's at a different stage of their life, and they have different strategies and considerations that could be either costing you a lot of money by not being aware of them, or assuming that you can't use something and missing out on other opportunities. So I think that's the most important part of it. The second part of it is find out the facts, use the rules to your advantage, and then be able to apply them in a way that gets you the best outcome possible. If you need a deduction, investigate it. If you need to add money to super, investigate it. Understand the legislation that you're adhering to and make the most of those opportunities. Make sure that if you are reaching or sneaking up on age 75, you have considered recontribution strategies, and don't mix total super balance for transfer balance cap. They're two very different tests that have different applications, so you can't muddy them together. Don't assume that something is expensive when it may not be. A self-managed super fund is a wonderful vehicle. It's not always going to be appropriate, but it's also not always going to be expensive compared to the alternative. So again, investigate what you're going to do, claim deductions where you need them, make contributions where it's appropriate, and don't just assume that because somebody says it's so, that it is. And I think if people just stick to those sorts of general rules, they'll be able to make the most of the legislation relevant to their situation.
Now, there is, of course, the old saying that when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, yes, because of ASSUME. But it's not just a matter of potentially being embarrassed, is it? It's potentially a matter of costing you a lot of money.
It's hugely. Like I saw one yesterday where somebody wasn't aware that they could use the transition to retirement legislation, and we came up with a strategy where they could pay the balance of their mortgage off by the first week of July next year. And he'd started the conversation by saying, well, I've got to work for another 5 years to clear this debt. So again, assuming that you can't is very, very expensive, because there are some wonderful pieces of legislation that, if used correctly and used in conjunction with other strategies, can be very, very powerful for getting you closer to where you need to be a lot faster.
Absolutely. So don't make assumptions. Acquire some knowledge, and the best way to do that, of course, is talk to somebody who actually is qualified to give you that advice.
Yeah, it generally helps.
Indeed. So on that note, Luke, where can listeners get more information?
So office number 6260-4749. We've got envisionfinancial.com.au on the internet. We've got the Strategy Stacker, Luke Talks Money, on iTunes and Spotify. We've got Envision Financial Canberra on YouTube. And we've got Smart Money Strategy, your ultimate guide to financial planning, where we've actually laid out the rules of all of these strategies, so you don't have to assume anything.
And today, as I said at the beginning, is exactly 2 months until Christmas Eve.
Yes.
So that would be an ideal Christmas gift.
Lovely present.
There you go. Smart Money Strategy available in bookstores everywhere. Luke, thanks very much.
See you next week.
We'll catch up with you again next time. Luke Smith from Envision Financial will be back with us once again at the same time next Friday afternoon between 4:30 and 5, right here on 2CC.